Councilmember Gamroth, or Councilor Gamroth was showing what not to do to teach the public. Thank you for that educational moment. Just kidding. Council will now discuss a resolution authorizing the submission of the community readiness grant application. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the resolution by title only.
Business Council for the North Platte Park Foundational Infrastructure Project in the city of Casper.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilor Kathy, seconded by Councilor Pollock. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilors. Good evening, everybody. Tonight is the opportunity for council to consider sort of in a second phase approach, if you will, the public hearing that you had last week. Also on a formal basis, however, with regard to the potential passage of the associated and related resolution. This resolution is sort of the final step, if you will, that gives council the blessing to move forward with the application. As I mentioned last week in our conversation, indeed, council will have the opportunity to turn down a grant agreement if indeed council gives the green light to us tonight, and the Wyoming Business Council as well as the State Land Investment Board also give us green lights as it relates to potentially receiving this grant. As council is aware, the corpus request of the Business Council is for $5 million, which makes the total request pursuant to the city's requisite match being $6.2 million in the form of the entire request that we have in front of the Business Council. With this phase of development, council will recall also that we do plan to take a phased approach. Again, if we're successful with all the multiple steps that we need to take in this endeavor to come back to the Business Council and ostensibly slip with additional developments that we see needed from a utility standpoint here and potentially others. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would turn the time over to the council for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Let's move on to discussion. Is there any discussion around this? No? Okay. Any amendments? All right. Any abstentions or nay votes? All right. All voting aye, say aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all councilors voting aye, the motion passes.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Kathy, seconded by Councilor
Haskins or
Caskins. Either one. Toss it up. Any abstentions or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all councilors voting aye, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. Is that all you needed, Carter?
Thank you.
You bet you. All right, moving on to our work session. Any meeting follow-up? Carter, do you have anything for us?
I do not. Thank you.
Do councilors have anything for a follow-up from last week's meeting? Everybody's good? All right. Let's move on to our next agenda item, LGBTQ Advisory Board update. The advisory board would make it to the AMBO here.
Hello, my name is Skylar. I use he, they pronouns, and this is Dave and Alex. We are all members of the LGBTQ Advisory Committee for City Council, and we are here to give you guys an update on kind of the things that we've been doing so far this year since last time. So the first thing we wanted to give you guys a small update on is that October is when we had a few seats roll over for revision and for people to be able to like apply to be on our council. These are the list of our current members. We do have 2 new members as of this month. Shannon and Rob. And then we voted on a new chair and co-chair. Dave and Alex are chair and co-chair respectively as of this month. Just to give a brief overview of a couple of our accomplishments and then the things we're going to discuss with you today. So recent accomplishments are the NDO information was updated on the city website and is more accessible now to people who are attempting to find information about us. We also have a continued relationship with the Detroit County School District and with Casper College. And we had a large amount of community involvement in Pride in June that we'll also be talking about. So we did a climate survey that will be discussing the data collection about. We also have a new relationship with the Human Rights Campaign and are updating our scorecard. And then we also will discuss our continued partnership with Casper Pride and the next steps for the Casper Cares project, which we've been working on periodically. For the Pride survey results, that's the packet that we handed out to you guys. It was 147 unique individuals responded to our survey. We have respondents across wide ranges of sexuality, gender identity, gender expression, education, race, socioeconomic status. And we have respondents between the ages of 10 and 75 years old, 25 of them being under the age of 18. Some of the biggest reasons why we wanted to put out a survey like this was to identify community needs that are not currently being fulfilled. So these are some of the most popular responses that we received. These were fill-in answers, so they were able to write whatever they wanted to in these. Some of the most popular responses that we received were gender-neutral bathrooms, affordable housing and food assistance, more LGBTQ+ inclusive spaces, businesses, and events, suicide prevention support groups, support for LGBTQ youth, and LGBTQ center, mental health resources, non-religious based homeless shelters, LGBTQ affirming job opportunities, and support or protections via legislation. One of the most important questions to us on this survey was, what do you believe are some of the most pressing issues that the LGBTQ community faces in Casper? And some of the most common responses we received was a lack of queer inclusive safe spaces to socialize, bullying and discrimination in the school district and in the community, anti-LGBTQ sentiment socially and in state legislation, and overall lack of understanding and acceptance of the community, and then a lack of local resources for safe spaces, healthcare, particularly a concern was affordable trans inclusive healthcare and general overall support. And now I will hand you over for our MEI update.
Thank you. I get to do some really cool sharing with you all. So just for some historical data, so we shared with you in March some of the Municipal Equality Index scorecard that the Human Rights Campaign puts out. Shared with you our 2015 score was a 3 out of 100, made some gains in 2022 with a 20 out of 100. So over the last 6 months, we've kind of taken a look at the scorecard and tried to see what we can do proactively to increase our own score. So what we've done in the last 6 months, and by we, I mean Heidi, our HR representative, helping us out a ton. We proactively reached out to the Human Rights Campaign and asked what we could do to improve our score on that website. So they sent us a large questionnaire and asking for additional resources and information about what we as a community are doing and what the city is doing. And so with that information, had a back and forth with the representative from HRC, and it looks to be that our 2023 projected score is going to be 65 out of 100. So pretty significant gain with quite a bit of room for improvement as well. So we're really excited about that. And on the back of the handout, the one that's more in chart form, shows a little bit about like what HRC is looking for, as well as where we've been and where we may currently sit with the recent update. I want to pull up. Is it this one?
Yes, okay.
Okay. All right, I don't know how to do it. Thank you. pull up kind of what the scorecard looks like and what it looked like in 2022. So with non-discrimination, of course, with the passing of the ordinance, we made significant gains there and received all of our points there. The other 4 categories, we are still continuing to kind of look at and what we can do to improve our score. The flex scores kind of come in as things that may or may not pertain to specific communities and kind of allow us to flex a little bit. So we do definitely have some room for improvement. With the law enforcement and the leadership in LGBTQ plus equality, I think some of those things can be addressed through what we hope to do with Casper Cares, and Dave will talk with you all a little bit about that as well. I think what's different now with our relationship with HRC is before they were looking at the city of Casper through an outsider's lens and just looking at what was available maybe on city website or just public information in the paper and stuff like that. Now we have a direct relationship with an HRC representative that is working closely with us and is willing to continue to collaborate with us and support us. And they have said that they're willing to come to our committee meetings and come and meet with council as well to give us continued guidance and support going forward and how we can increase our score and also maintain the things that we are doing. So a lot of great information came out of it. I think a lot of great score updates and hope to continue that work as we go on. This Laramie score as of 2022, granted, we don't know what other communities in Wyoming are currently doing to increase their score. Laramie's currently sitting at a 70. Cheyenne's at a 28. So we are working to not compete with the other municipalities in the state, but we are working to try and make our city more inclusive. And I think we're doing some good work so far.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you very much for this time. So last we had talked about Casper Cares. We were kind of heading in the direction of a model program out of Seattle that is an accreditation program, but it was very strict in the training and the hands-on that would have to happen at the police department. So we're kind of taking in a different direction, and we're going to partner with Casper Pride with their current focus on safe businesses already here in Casper. So we're going to focus more on a marketing and communication focus from us versus training and education of businesses. That program out of Seattle, we have to actually have training programs for the business owners and employees there. With this and collaborating with the police department, they're already taking sensitivity training, diversity, and anti-bias training, and they're CALIA accredited. So CALIA is the Commission for the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. To be accredited, they have to go through these trainings at least every year. So we want to just offer the community a lot more knowledge as to what our police department already can offer and what they're trained on, as opposed to kind of going into businesses and trying to tell them how to run their stuff. But we are partnering with Casper Pride, and so going forward, we'll be working closely with them on putting out more of that communication. And that, I believe, is there you go. Questions?
Awesome. Council, do you have any questions for the advisory committee? Advisory council.
There was you had some acronyms at the beginning. Some of them were explained later on, but there was one, I think NDO was non-discrimination ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would encourage you to avoid acronyms if you can.
Sure.
In the future, just because it took a while to kind of figure out what they were, and maybe a little orientation about human rights campaign and that what HRC is and that kind of thing. But,
Definitely.
yeah, just suggestions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
But thanks for the information.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious. I was going to look this up later, probably tonight. But I was, our updated score of 65 out of 100, I think is what you said. How does that stack up? It sounds like we were rated with 500 other cities. Where does that rank in the pack?
Ooh, overall, I don't know. I mean, I think when I've gone through and looked at it before, like cities like Denver, which obviously have a massive population difference than us, were like 80, 90. So I think it's kind of, I don't know how it compares with other cities like of our same size. That would be a great question that we can do some digging on for sure.
The score's still, it's technically a projected score, so we're still waiting on the final actual scoring of it, but that's what they're projecting us to be at with all the changes that we've made so far.
Any other comments? Let me just say, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go, Jai.
Do you have access to this after the conversation, presentation?
Oh, we should, yeah.
Could that get sent, could we get that to the, I'm looking at Heidi, sorry. There she is. Could you get that sent out to the council? This information would be fantastic. Thank you, Heidi.
We also have the full scope of the data we gathered from Tri. It's about 20 some pages too that we can share along.
If we get that, that'd be great too.
Yeah.
So let me just say that in an effort as we work as a community, right, to have these, it's a great opportunity for us to understand inclusivity and equality and understanding that. And this has been a lot of great things that have come from this advisory council. And so I just extend a great appreciation for the work that you guys continue to do to make Casper, everybody in Casper feel safe, especially those that definitely struggle for sure. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate all your work.
Thank you guys.
Heidi, thanks for all your help from the city side. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna let Carter tee us up on this liquor licenses and alcohol related crime trends. Thanks again, guys. We appreciate it. Bye.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, several weeks ago, maybe even as much as a couple months ago. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I was just asking, should counselor or should Amber leave?
Conflict on too.
What do you think?
Mayor, Councilor, I think that this presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, is purely informational, so I don't think it's asking for any direction or action, so I don't see that there would be a conflict, Councilor Pollock, to stay. With regard to the second item, I think we would be asking for some direction on that, so I still think it's a little attenuated, but I would leave it to your discretion on that.
Yeah,
I'll leave for open containers since I was a participant, but
Yep.
perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry about that, Carter.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Sure, thank you. Let's see. Pardon me, a couple months ago, council had the conversation pertaining to some additional dialogue they would like to have with regard to alcohol and licensing and vending and so on. Upon further review of the video footage that we captured in this most recent conversation, it seems to me that three things kind of stood out with regard to the conversation that came that evening. Number one, of course, was probably the chief issue was whether or not the addition of licenses within our community actually increases consumption and workload from a public safety standpoint. The second piece that was discussed that evening was with regard to whether or not council or the city would like to pursue any responsible vending or incentivized responsible sales of alcohol in the community. And then finally, a much lesser topic was with regard to what it is that the metrics are that we use. And that is widely used as it relates to public safety impacts with alcohol. And so we tried to frame our conversation to answer those three broad questions. Undoubtedly, however, council will have other questions and perhaps other directions you'd like to see. And so if that is the case, this is meant to be informational. But if there is more homework that we need to do, we certainly stand at your service and with respect to whatever that might be. So if I could, Mr. Mayor, turn the time over to our chief to walk us through some of those things, I'd appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you. Chief, the floor is yours.
Sure, I want the floor. Before we get going, I feel it's very important to state that the Casper Police Department and the Chief of Police, myself, recognizes the social importance and economic benefits of our alcohol-related industry and the opportunities that our citizens have. It definitely impacts the livability of our community, and we recognize and support all of that. Reviewing that September 5th council meeting, we did our best, as the city manager has indicated, to identify what council was asking for that day. The discussion was a little bit varied. We did our best to glean it down to this. So the first topic that I felt council wanted addressed was the consideration of, we recently, because of census population change, were ascribed the opportunity for additional liquor licenses if we so choose. That engendered the query of, should we be doing that? So the concept of alcohol outlet density is something that has been researched for many, many decades. In full disclosure, as part of a capstone project with Northwestern University, I personally undertook a review of published peer-reviewed studies that was out there at the time. So it's a little bit dated. But most of the studies that I have quoted in here today are still referenced in the research that's available today. So when I was preparing this packet for council, I did a quick, just cursory search of, is there additional research out there that contradicts these things? And found that these studies were still being referenced and quoted, and there wasn't contradictory research out there that was meeting the criteria of good peer-reviewed content. Alcohol outlet density in all of the research just refers to any location that sells or dispenses alcohol. So how that applies to us could be a bar and grill license, a club license, a retail package license for off-premise consumption. Could be a grocery store, could be a packaged liquor store or a dispensing bar. The research is pretty unequivocal. There is just scads and scads of research out there that does look at, in any general neighborhood or district or area, think even ward or police department areas that we allocate our resources to, that the number of alcohol outlets available in that area definitely has an impact on crime. So the research that I've given you here is a study out of New Jersey that was pretty comprehensive. That research showed that traditionally they looked at some of the more common factors that are commonly associated with increases or decreases in crime. They looked at median household income or poverty or the lack thereof can have an impact on crime. And also employment, whereas in areas where unemployment was high, crime was invariably higher. But the research looked at, well, let's compare that to the presence of alcohol outlet density. And that particular study showed that in any given area, where there is just one outlet, if there was in fact two outlets in that area, that it had a significant increase. And those numbers were that a 1% decrease in violent crime could be achieved by a less than 1% decrease in alcohol outlet density, or an 8.3% increase in the rate of employment, or a 4.5% increase in median household income. So it went on to give advice to communities that our ability to impact easily average household median income or employment is a little bit limited, but you can impact the rates of violent crime pretty significantly just through a little bit of regulation of the alcohol outlet density. So that 1-for-1. So in the city of Casper, we have 87 alcohol outlets at this time, so it wouldn't take much to make a 1% change if that was what council was looking at. Another study focused on the parishes in Louisiana. They found that the neighborhoods with 2 alcohol outlets had a 24% higher homicide rate than neighborhoods that only had 1. They also looked at the relationship between violent crime and increased alcohol consumption. In that one, they related alcohol consumption to alcohol availability. So there's a much less tenuous direct link to this, but it can be inferred that wherever there is a 10% increase in alcohol consumption in a neighborhood resulted in a, roughly speaking, a 1% increase in homicide, a 6% increase in assaults, and a 9% increase in robberies. For those of you that are curious, I brought citations with me today. If you want citations and you want to have 1,000 pages of rather sterile and boring reading, by all means, I can give you the citations. Before I move on to the next category, I would open it up to any questions regarding this topic.
Any questions for the chief on this?
No question, Chief. Appreciate you doing the research, though. It's in line with, again, it's been a few years since I dug heavily into this, but it seems to be in line with all the research that I had gone through at that point. And so I just think it underscores the importance of us. Again, I've advocated it in the past, but just being mindful as we look at potentially doubling our bar and grill licenses and stuff, just being mindful of the impact. Causation doesn't always, correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but there's enough research out there on this topic to indicate that, the more densely located alcohol outlets are, there is a swing. It increases the potential for crime. And so we just as a council need to be mindful of that. And I think work harder to draw that line. Where's the line for us? It's a balance. And so as opposed to being reactive after the fact, I think we need to be giving more forethought to this and just making sure that we're allowing this development to occur in a responsible way that we're all comfortable with. Thank you. Chief.
Mayor and Council, in regards to responsible serving programs, first of all, I did some research as to what exists out there. I think everybody in the room is acutely aware that Wyoming traditionally takes a very hands-off approach to responsible serving of alcohol. There are specific rules in place that prohibits what is commonly known as dram shop liquor laws. So it reduces liability on the vendor. So we're pretty entrenched in Wyoming in this. In specific, I looked at the Department of Justice study from 2003 that analyzed all 50 of the states and kind of ranked them out according to how they're doing in this. They looked at these 12 key areas that I'm not going to list out in here today, but that responsible beverage service was one of the key areas that they looked at. Of all 50 states, Wyoming is one of only 3, Wyoming, Florida, and Nevada, that do not regulate the sale of alcohol to somebody that's already deemed to be intoxicated. That exists even today. So that study is 20 years old, but that is unchanged where we are today. We still are one of those, only the 3 states. 27 of the states in 2003 did not have a responsible service of alcohol program. Wyoming was one of those states. Since that study was completed, several of the states have kind of started to make progress into this area of regulation. But I don't have a more updated study of what the results of that are. Without question, there is research available that is out there right now that says that the anticipated results of responsible serving programs didn't come back what they anticipated. It was less effective than they thought it would be. And one of the more recent studies pointed out that the only ones that were showing a demonstrative statistical positive impact in the reduction of crime were ones where there was heavy on regulation, but that regulation contained a heavy dose of enforcement that was consistently applied. So a lot of studies showed that having a statute or an ordinance in place without enforcement that is consistent and reoccurring, that it would be essentially a waste of time. You're not going to get the results that one would anticipate. So there's, we are in a state that's one of those ones that kind of does not regulate this. And, frankly, we're going to go into some stats here pretty soon, but you're going to see the impact of that, I think, in the stats, at least from my opinion. Before I move on to the next topic, I would open it up for discussion.
Questions? Steve?
At one time, weren't we requiring the liquor salespeople to do tips training for their purveyors? And are we still doing that?
Mayor, council, excellent question. In 2018, we brought this forward to council. Council discussed kind of these topics at that time. And council did adopt a new ordinance that required tips training, alcohol server training for any person who is selling alcohol. There are some provisions for new employees and things like that. When we implemented that, we began to see an almost immediate drop in our blood alcohol content at time of arrest in our DUI drivers. And we do 3 to 4 compliance checks on the establishments annually now to make sure that they are continuing to train their servers, their employees who are serving alcohol with TIPS certification. So that is on the books today, and the police department does conduct those compliance checks.
Thank you. And it sounds, as a follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
It sounds like that program has had some positive impact then by your reduction in the anyhow, the blood alcohol of the drunk drivers.
Mayor, council, it's important to me to be very clear on this. We saw some initial reductions. We were very pleased with the results of that. Since that time, we have introduced into our society some things that we did not anticipate and very hard to control. COVID had a dramatic impact on alcohol consumption. Bad habits were created. And so we had normalizing BAC results for past several years. 2022 saw dramatic increases. I think unscientifically, just through my years of experience, I think the pressures on our society right now are significantly higher, and the coping mechanisms that people turn to are often predictable, and alcohol being one. 2022 saw significant increases in the blood alcohol content.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Jai, then Kyle.
Good, actually,
You're
that was
good?
my question.
Okay,
Yeah,
you bet.
thanks.
Kyle?
Thank you, Mayor. On Councilor Kathy's point a little bit, what impact, if any, do you think there would be of a state statute prohibiting the sale of alcohol to already intoxicated people? Do you think that would have an impact in Casper, or our mandate that purveyors have to go through and implement TIPS training, does that already cover that? Do you see a gap is what I'm inquiring?
Mayor, council, I am going to be very circumspect in how I respond to that. There's a reason why 47 states have said that you should not serve somebody that is already intoxicated. The aftermath of that is undeniable. It results in domestic violence, DUI crashes, accidents. There's a lot of research. I could arm you with vast amounts of studies, hospital emergency room admissions, school attendance rates. There is a lot of data out there that would indicate it is wise to regulate the service of alcohol to persons that are already intoxicated. From the police department's point of view, we are seeing an increase in the severity of our DUI crashes. Those crash rates are not, there's not huge spikes in that, but what we are seeing is the severity of those crashes has increased. And that is increased, that increase is corresponding directly to our increase in the blood alcohol content at the time of arrest. So there is anecdotal data out there that would indicate the states that implemented it saw an immediate reduction in harm, that there was a demonstrable reduction in harm. And I could provide you with that data off schedule. It's way too voluminous to go through tonight.
Thank you, Chief. Follow up. I'll try to be more surgical in how I ask this. I'm gonna fail, but I'll give it another shot. So we already require folks go through TIPS training, and I believe part of that training is not serving people that are obviously inebriated. And so from your perspective, what would a state statute provide above and beyond that we've already required through TIPS training through ordinance, I guess is how we're doing that currently?
Sorry, I didn't catch the nuances of your question. Let's go back to that prior research that I was quoting. The attempts to regulate need to be corresponding with a heavy dose of enforcement. The states that have regulated the sale of alcohol to persons who are already intoxicated makes it a criminal act. It's punishable by as a crime. It's a low-level crime for the waitress, the bartender, the person that actually was doing the serving, but it also focuses on the establishment, thereby establishing an incentive for the entire industry and the community and law enforcement to all partner together to reduce accidents, injuries, and crime related to alcohol. So what you would gain from that is that incentive to prevent its occurrence. Right now, there's no harm, no foul. If we've trained you to not do it, this is best practices, but you're not incentivized to do it, there's no reason to do it. So what we're left with is the good conscience and common sense of the individual server and their application of their training versus, frankly, in my career, I have interviewed plenty of people under the circumstances of an enforcement encounter. And you know, the server sometimes falls victim to the business plan or business model or wishes of the management or ownership of the establishment rather than their training. So it kind of brings it all into a focus by which there is incentive to adhere to those best practices.
Thank you.
Jenna, then Lisa.
So I'm kind of on the fence now whether or not TIPS is even necessary. I mean, as far as putting it onto the establishment, would they be better off having less regulations and then just doing their own than having the TIPS, having all their servers TIPS qualified? If it's not making that huge of an impact with numbers.
Mayor, Counselor, I would tell you that education and information is always going to be our primary resource in the combating of crime and public safety concerns and quality of life in our community. Information and education is going to be our primary goal. As is always the case, the police department seeks to have compliance rather than enforcement. We would rather teach and educate than issue tickets and take people to jail.
Right, but at the end of the day, it's still up to the establishment and the server whether or not they're going to serve their client, if they're inebriated or not. It's up to them. So that's where it gets a little tricky. And I'm like, I don't know, is it necessary?
So,
or is it going to save the police department lots of money because they're not going to have to go do those checks?
yeah, so when I share with you statistics over the next couple pages of this, those are statistics of enforcement actions that we've become involved in. It's very, very hard to document the enforcement actions that were prevented because a responsible server or responsible establishment has rules, guidelines, training programs, things in place to do that. that is almost impossible for me to provide you with the data. And I believe it will be my official opinion that it absolutely helps. What I can't do is tell you where we would be without it.
Vice Mayor.
I was just curious, do you know if the other municipalities also have the tips training, or is it just Casper?
Mayor, Council, to the best of my knowledge, Casper was paving the way on this. I'm not aware that the other ones have the same conditions.
Steve.
If, excuse me, if it were made illegal, like it is in the other 47 states, to serve alcohol to an intoxicated person, and they wind up not catching that the guy really is, but then he goes out and has a wreck, and let's say he kills somebody, and he blows a, what, 0.1, then can they legally go back and charge the server and the bar for involuntary manslaughter or wrongful death or any of those types of things?
Mayor, Councilor, very high threshold on this. The circumstance that you just described, I know of no state that would allow that at a 0.1. And you know, there's the city attorney's probably itching in his seat to get engaged with this. You know, there's terms of negligence and gross negligence and gross indifference. These are all things that are applicable according to the wording of those individual states. Some states have identified a per se limit. Right now in Wyoming, it's 0.08 is the per se limit, where we deem, regardless of all other things, if you're over this, you shouldn't be driving. Some states have identified a per se limit that is usually quite high, that says after this point, it should be readily apparent that the person was intoxicated and shouldn't be served. In all enforcement actions, regardless of the crime, great amounts of discretion is provided to the investigating officers and the prosecutors to determine the totality of the circumstances on whether or not prosecution is even warranted, given the information available to the potential suspect at the time.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, Council. So just to add on, so dram shop liability, I think that there's really two prongs potentially to it. There's the criminal aspect, but then many states, just in a brief search here, at least 38, have civil liability attached. So whereas if I have a family member that's hit by a drunk driver, I can certainly sue that driver, but I can't in Wyoming sue the establishment that served them the alcohol. In states that have dram shop laws, if they have served that individual to an extent that they shouldn't have, I can, through civil means, sue that provider of alcohol and hold them civilly responsible, in addition to any potential criminal penalties that could be levied. And in some states, it's even per se, if you can establish they serve them beyond a certain limit, then they're per se negligent and responsible. And so there's plus and minuses, and we could probably spend the entire evening, but there's many different prongs to that. The idea is, I think, that in those states that there's the specter of that civil liability out there, and that provides an incentive, in addition to the potential criminal liability, to that establishment to get tips type training to ensure that there is best practices employed. And to the chief's example, that helps that individual server who may be getting pressure from the owner of the establishment to continue serving. It helps them because the owner is going to have some impetus to not force that because of the specter of civil liability. So anyway, very intricate topic that we could spend lots of time discussing.
Amber.
Eric, can you hold to, if I understand correctly, there's a distinction between a dram shop law and making serving of an intoxicated person illegal. Those are two separate things. I don't believe 47 states have dram shop laws, but 47 states do make it illegal serve an intoxicated person. So I believe that's a crime in and of itself, whereas dram shop law can be, you can be held accountable for a series of crimes that happen after the serving of the intoxicated person. So
Yeah, Mayor, Councilor Pollock, I think you're right. I think technically dram shop laws are typically associated with the civil liability aspect. And just here briefly, I saw a stat that said 38 states or something like that. And that is separate from criminal statutes or, you know, laws that would criminalize that behavior. So we may use them interchangeably, but I think they are two separate regulatory schemes.
So theoretically, Wyoming could pass a law prohibiting serving of an intoxicated person without creating a dram shop liability.
I think that's correct.
Okay, Chief.
Thank you. This is a great discussion and great questions. You know, without question, the number of officers that you employ, the amount of resources that you allocate to the police department, the number of employees that you have, they are all impacted by the unlawful or overuse of alcohol. Underage drinking continues to be a problem nationwide. Underage drinkers tend to draw more resources than an adult drinker. They end up having more accidents, more injuries, more circumstances where they lack the maturity to navigate an emotional circumstance when they're intoxicated. So that does create problems for us. Some of the things that are much more tangible that you can't put your finger on is, you know, one would be an example of public intoxication. It's currently unlawful to be intoxicated to the point where you're endangering yourself or others in our community. And last year in 2022, we arrested 319 persons. And that could be as a result of we were dispatched to a disturbance, we were dispatched to specific things, or we saw somebody laying, you know, on the sidewalk and unable to care for themselves. And we're very limited in our detoxification resources to allow somebody to go someplace where they can be safe while they have a chance to get more of their wits about them. Year to date in 2023, we still have two and a half months to go. Almost 3 months to go when I ran these statistics. So we're already at 308. So we're seeing a sizable increase this year in those arrests for public intoxication. When I looked at the days of the week, the months and time of day on these arrests, there is absolutely, you know, as one can easily guess, there is a seasonal component to it. Beginning in June through the end of October, there is a massive bump in those public intoxication arrests. Stands for reason that people are less likely to be out in February in 4 feet of snow under those circumstances. So we address that heavily in the summer. Remember the discussion that council was having when we spoke about the open container areas downtown was directly reflective of that. You know, we're only going to do it during this key components of the season. Our public intoxication BAC results, those are climbing very, very rapidly. It's been very disappointing right now. Most of the ones that we are rendering aid to and getting help for, they are above a 0.20, which is, you know, approaching 3 times the legal limit, if you will. DUI continues to be a problem here. As I've mentioned, we are seeing an increase in the severity of it. Last year, we arrested 310 persons for DUI. We're on track this year for approximately the same amount. So for since 2018 through 2022, 1,487 people have been arrested for DUI in our community. Those numbers really, you know, I would submit to you there are variances here, and those variances are generally don't exceed 10%. So it's pretty consistent year over year over year over year for the last 5 years. We're averaging that approximately 300 a year. The BAC level is always right there hovering around twice the legal limit. The BAC at the time of arrest of a DUI offender, the BAC level of a person at the scene of a crash. An alcohol-related crash is generally about a 0.24 is the average on that. And on that last graph that I have given you here, you'll see that in 2022, our average BAC really climbed by almost 0.4 of a point. So it's 0.4 of a point. So a huge, statistically alarming increase last year. Councilman Gamrot quoted the, I believe you were quoting the WASCOP study recently, and our most recent report, the 2022 report, showed that 41% of all of our arrests at the city of Casper involve an intoxicated offender. I would point out to you, though, that that is information that is garnered at the booking facility, that those determinations are made at the booking facility, and sometimes the person is not cooperative. They're more boisterous and more distracting. They take more resources, and sometimes that questionnaire is not completed based upon the level of cooperation of the offender. So, we believe it's a little bit underreported. In my opinion, when you add into, when you actually take a hard dive into our arrest records, you will see that approximately 50% of our arrests are for violating conditions of release, for failing to comply with the court's orders or failing to comply with probation. And if you were to track those back to what the original offense was and what caused them to be in violation, you would find that it's also alcohol related. So the true numbers are going to be way higher on those that are alcohol related. But the statistics that I've given you for that, the 41.26% are the people that were intoxicated at the time of their arrest or perceived to be. Questions on current trends?
Vice Mayor.
I did have a question. So year over year, I guess, I know that we have repeat offenders. Do you have something that's just saying, you had 310 last year, 300 and whatever this year kind of a thing, but 50 of them or repeat, because we do have a lot of repeat offenders too, or I don't know, it would be, because I do know that we do have that.
Mayor, Counselor, great question. And Judge Martinez and Letitia would be all over that question, because with that question, my officers know and are on a first name basis with some of those repeat offenders. It's my opinion, but I think the judge would back me up on that. She's tired of seeing some of those. And so that is being manifest in the incarceration budget of the Casper Police Department. And so we do have some repeat offenders. What you are hearing from me, unscientifically, it's just based upon my casual reading of the daily reports that I get, is without question, we have a new group of people that are being arrested that in the 2 or 3 months ago were not in our community. We didn't have records on them, and now we're arresting them multiple times a month. And so we are seeing kind of this new influx of people who are prone to alcohol abuse and the crimes that are associated with that alcohol abuse.
Jack.
Thank you. This is really helpful. I have a lot of questions, but I think just on the last information that you shared about trends, we were talking about our ordinance on tips, and whether or not it has an impact. I'm just curious if you have any awareness about how our trends compare to others, maybe Cheyenne or similar communities, in terms of what they're seeing.
Mayor, Councilor, I have not done the research on our other communities. The impact is enough that I'm I spend my hours addressing the needs of Casper. I could attempt to obtain that information. But there's no guarantee that other communities are collecting that information and whether or not they are encouraging similar programs or taking similar efforts to reduce or mitigate the harm caused by the unlawful use of alcohol.
Jenna.
So, and I'm just gonna sound kind of go off here, but, taking into account what you've said, I don't know that, I mean, alcohol is not the root of the problem. I don't think that that's what's going on here. I think that it's more, it stems from the different societal issues that we have going on here too in Casper. And like you stated earlier, I mean, and a lot of people picked up bad habits during COVID, but that was a time when everybody was, didn't have any place to go, and that's what they fell back on. We have a lot of homelessness that leads to alcoholism, that the repeat offenders who have criminal records who lean towards alcohol. There's, all the stressors, the inflation, everything that's happening in the world today. People are using alcohol as aid for some sort of relief or painkiller, if you will. But so how do we, I don't know that, putting more regulations and doing stuff on the alcohol, being hard asses on that is gonna solve a lot of the problems when they're not the root, it's stemming from bigger issues.
Chief.
There's gonna be plenty of people that may share that opinion. I would tell you, the research would tell us otherwise. There is one prominent researcher that some years ago came out and just declared flat out, and think about the direct and blunt nature of this. Alcohol causes violence. That was the conclusion. And so I would give you a couple examples. One is a heavily studied because it's bracketed, was Barrow, Alaska. There was a period of no time, a time when there were no regulations, but they were, during the winter months, they were confined up there, and the police department in the emergency room, there's all these impacts. And so they passed an ordinance prohibiting the sale and consumption of alcohol in Barrow, Alaska. And so there was a date where it stopped. And some period of months went by, and the citizens said, "Hey, I kind of missed my opportunities here." So the voters reinstated it, and then there was some more tweaks to it. There was a temporary restraining order on it, and then they reinstated it, and then they said, "Holy cow, there's a lot of problems here that we didn't anticipate." So they reinstated the ban. And now currently it's legal again in Barrow. So they have all of these stops and start dates, and the impact on domestic violence, on injuries, on hospital admissions, school attendance, all of it was heavily documented. They have those numbers, and it's perfect. They know the exact dates on it, and so they were able to track that. There's a study out of Norway that absolutely parallels that same thing. And so what you're not hearing from me, and what you are hearing from me, is the distinction between the social use of alcohol and the unlawful use of alcohol. There's concrete studies that the alcohols in minors, that does not mix. That there is harmful outcomes of that. And then the unlawful use of alcohol, which I would define for you, driving while intoxicated, the domestic violence, the child abuse, the things that occur while under the influence of alcohol, those are definitely impacted by it. So I'm not trying to define or split hairs here. There is an overabundance of peer-reviewed research that indicates that the alcohol may not be the sole root, but it's one of the main roots.
So you're gonna start the prohibition?
I am not. That is exactly why I started this out with the statement that I did. We do recognize that the livability of our community, the financial benefits of our businesses, those thriving businesses. We're not, you're never gonna have a chief of police while I'm here advocating for prohibition, but we do know that there are some things that work. I think that it's good that council's having a discussion where you're seeking input and seeking data. So as you decide what to do with liquor licenses, that's based upon information rather than just tradition of, whatever the case may be. So I think all this is good, but we are not making any recommendations to you today at all.
Right. So Minnesota, I know that there's and I'm sure there's a lot of other states that do this too, but just throwing it out there, is an alternative, not that it's gonna happen. I don't want anybody to get upset. Same thing with a livelihood and stuff, but, just saying that in some other cities specifically, because I know of some in northern Minnesota, that in the city center, like considered, it's all 3-2, and they don't serve anything that's hard inside the city to cut down on a lot of that crime and stuff. But then you can go to bars in the county, and that's where they all are. So they do the liquor and all of those. They have different permits, but just wanted to say that's helps. I don't know if there's any research on any of that either. Have you heard of it?
I have lived in communities. I think many of us in the room can probably think back at a time in their life when they lived in jurisdiction where just across that intersection, or that state line.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Wisconsin still too.
sure. So, look, jurisdictions enact things like that because they've looked at their resources and the calls for services that are related to this, and they want to reconcile those two. That's why they enact things like this.
Carl. Thank you, Mayor. You might have already answered part of my question. Before I move on to that, though, I do think it's another example of irony that we all laugh at the idea of prohibition of alcohol, yet that's exactly how we treat every other substance other than alcohol. Despite your conclusion at the end of our memo that alcohol-related crime constitutes the single greatest adverse impact on the Casper Police Department. Again, another illustration of irony, I think, in how just the United States as a whole, it's not specific to Casper, but addresses this issue. The question I had was related to one that the Vice Mayor had earlier in regards to repeat offenders. When I was more intimately familiar with this data, I thought I remembered it being the case that of people arrested for public intoxication, I believe it abided by like the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the people arrested for public intox constituted, so 20% of the individuals arrested for public intox constituted 80% of the arrests. Is that still in line, or as you described earlier, are you seeing that vary, I guess? That's my question.
Mayor, Councilor, me personally, have never heard the 80-20 rule applied to this particular topic. We do have known offenders, we know them. I think the officers can recognize, I think I'm going to so-and-so just by the nature of the dispatch. We do have those known offenders. What you are hearing from me is that recently we have new unknown offenders that are occupying a large majority of our time. And so there's a couple of examples of people that were in our community for no more than a day. And we were already having adverse encounters with them. There's a lot of discussion and development of the idea of where'd they come from and why did they come here? But we are seeing this influx of people that are frequently appearing in our judicial system now for the same problem, and it is a direct result of alcohol abuse, addiction, and what that carries with it. So I can't vouch for the 80-20. We seem to have if you were to open up the mug shots, for example, of the person's arrested for this crime, you would see that it does not of a necessity follow demographic lines. So people of every class, every race, every sex, every orientation, every economic income level, it poses a problem for us.
Thank you.
I'm not totally sure. I guess, I mean, we're just sharing information. I wasn't fully in on the conversation of where this originated, so I hope this isn't off base in terms of the scope, but I mean, just kind of building off of what Jenna was saying, about, I think that this is really a two-part conversation, that obviously there are some regulatory and some lawful necessary components to violence, to crimes that are connected to alcohol. But I agree that there is also a strong prevention conversation that is missing from this specific slice of the pie. And so I think, like, if council is trying to think about this holistically about what's happening with crime, what's happening with drinking, I don't think it's wrong to take into consideration what you're saying and look at these root causes in combination with our law enforcement tools. I feel like, I don't know alcohol specifically, but I know crime and violence specifically, all the research shows that prevention and enforcement are two sides of the same. I mean, it's a two-pronged approach. So I think if this is a conversation that we're going into, we should be mindful of that and make sure that we're looking at the kind of full realm of tools that are at our disposal that help. I mean, you mentioned lack of appropriate or enough detox facilities and access to mental health care and things like that. You know, what is leading to such spikes in binge drinking? What's leading to the DUI? So I just want to encourage that we understand and know this information, know that there's the law and the enforcement component of it that is really important, but there is also this other slice of it too that feels equally important. So.
Officially speaking, this is a complex issue. Mm-hmm. By no means are there silver bullets. By no means the role of addiction in our society really does have an impact on our quality of life, and it does impact the budget of the city of Casper. And so Councilor Gamroth was correct. The alcohol may be the leading cause, but drug addiction is right there neck and neck vying for first place also. When you combine the two under the broader category of substance abuse, we could eliminate substance abuse. You'd need 25% of the police department, in my official opinion. You could just lay us all off because you wouldn't need us anymore. And so, any discussion of this should be holistic, but we can't get around the facts of regulation has proven to reduce and mitigate the harmful aspects of it without necessarily damaging the beneficial aspects of it in our businesses, the thriving, prosperous downtown, the livability. Think of all those things. There is plenty of data out there that says regulation does work. I could go on and on. I've taken way too much time tonight, but this is a complex issue, and the police department engaged in this conversation and this packet of information with great deal of hesitancy because we're not looking for controversy on this because it is a very complex issue. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Yeah, the Vice Mayor had something.
Just a quick question for Carter. Thinking of what Jai and Jenna had said, where are we at with the opioid money and setting up counseling for drug and alcohol?
We, Mr. Mayor, Counselor, Vice Mayor, excuse me, we have pursuant to conversation of the day and so on, the council is comfortable with the idea of staff putting together an RFP that would create a bevy of services for those who, according to the order that was originally put together with the settlement discussions of the day, create services that would allow for some level of detoxification as well as opioid addiction mitigation. The Homeless Coalition certainly took a very strong interest in the way in which those dollars could be used to help our homeless community. And to date, we have put together the RFP that would solicit services to garner the most services for the most people. The idea was that we would combine the resources that we have gathered from that settlement effort with the dollars that the commission has on an equal basis. And we are at this point awaiting response from the county as it relates to whether or not an agreement would be appropriate to enter into to leverage those dollars in that direction. And so that's kind of where we're at. Mr. Nelson, however, might have some additional insight as well.
No, Mayor, Council, I think City Manager Napier hit the nail right on the head. We did work collaboratively to put together that RFP. We've attempted to ascertain how much funding we can anticipate. There was a little bit of guidance that came out. It's been very nebulous in terms of A, how much total funding we'll receive, and B, over what time period we'll be receiving that. Settlements continue to roll out and payments continue to trickle in. I've worked and working with the county on a MOU to then present if the county is on board to try to leverage the funding, because the county and the city of Casper are the two entities here that have received that funding. And then lastly, we've looked at the scope of how we can put those funds to use. I mean, there is needs to be a nexus clearly with opioid addiction, but there is some room to work. So I think we're getting pretty close to being able to hopefully bring something forward to you guys and then roll that out. The thing that we did realize in several meetings is that the amount of funding is not going to be enough to build a brick and mortar type of detoxification center. So what we are most likely going to propose is doing an RFP that would go out to existing providers that they can provide the programming and perhaps have the facility. I know Central Wyoming Counseling Center, for instance, has just gone through some new leadership, and they're looking to maybe open some of those types of resources back up. So that's essentially where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of questions about this. Do you know what the state's doing with their money?
Mayor, Councilor, I don't know specifically. Obviously, they got, I think it was 30% and 70% is going to municipalities. And so I know that they're doing some things on a statewide level. I have not seen any of those details.
Okay. Wonder if there's something to explore then.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate it. I think this will be a conversation that we'll continue to have. I do agree, just as a service provider myself, understanding that level that it's addictions is really an issue that is pervasive, and we've seen a growth of that addictions, and I kind of lump it all into addictions, whether it's opiate or if it's alcohol. We're looking at addictions in that sense. So, Kyle, do you have one more thing you wanted to say?
I just wanted to make sure my colleagues and then also city staff was aware that we got an email, at least I did. Project Opioid is having a webinar tomorrow, and it's about this exact topic, how to best use in the most efficient and effective way possible the opioid settlement funding. And so I was going to try to catch some of it, and I would just encourage other folks to, maybe tune in.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, moving on to our downtown open container. I'll let Amber excuse herself. We'll holler at you when we're done, Amber. Thank you. Downtown open container district debrief. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Every time of the year, about this time of year, we sit down and debrief what it is that we learned with regard to the practice and process of the open container area in the downtown. Council knows that from year to year, we've adjusted the boundaries. We've talked about the time frame by which this open container area should be in effect. The rules, the time of the day, there's been just a variety of variations that council has adjusted from time to time to try to find the sweet spot, if you will, as to whether or not this is a popular program or becomes popular and so on. With each one of those years, council directs police to put together an overtime budget so that we can account for the amount of staffing that may be needed, given some of the other demands of the day, which, as you all know, summer tends to be pretty busy for our police department, and a very active time of the year as we are blessed to have actually throughout the summer here in Casper, Wyoming. The program, as near as we can tell, has been in effect since probably 2019. Certainly COVID has had a lot of impacts with respect to participation largely. But I can tell you that the program has not elicited a lot of attention and a lot of activity and a lot of participation that would warrant the continued use of this program to try to stimulate business and activity in the downtown. It just does not seem to be an instigator of economic activity in our downtown community. Accordingly, my recommendation would be that we consider disbanding this program, allow the resources that are dedicated not only from an overtime standpoint in the police department to be dedicated elsewhere. We've got a lot of areas where we can put it. Your jail budget is frustrating at best, and much bigger dollars, mind you, to try to manage and contend with. I would really like to have council consider very seriously the usefulness of this against the intended goals that this program had when it was put together. And as your manager, it's my job to be candid with you. That is absolutely my candid review. I don't think it's working like we thought it would.
Questions, Carter? Yep, Steve.
Basically, you summarized what I got out of the notes in our packet. Now, would that affect the specific events like that are had at David Street Station, or would those still be allowed? But basically, if there wasn't a big concert at David Street Station, then no alcohol type deal. Is that kind of the way you would envision this program to go forward, or lack thereof?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, thank you for bringing that aspect of this consideration up. Indeed, I would say that with regard to events or even large scale events that encompass a few blocks or whatever in the downtown, which is not, totally abnormal for the downtown area, that an application of this nature would be extremely appropriate. And in fact, the event permits that the clerk's office oversees could indeed accommodate and facilitate those types of needs on a per event basis and as requested. Councilor Kathy brings up another point that is a lot different now than what used to be the case when this program was initiated, wherein we did have a number of events that were taking place in the downtown on a fairly regular basis, as well as parts of the OID that just simply aren't taking place anymore. That may or may not have been a contributing factor as to why this program has had varying degrees of activity and participation.
Right. Basically, yes, at the time this was thought about is every Thursday night there was, I think it was Thursday nights, wasn't it? Was the Rock the Block and some of those types of things. And those have kind of gone away. And so that's why I was asking about the station and that part of it. So if that works, then I guess I'd throw my 2 cents worth into, yeah, put that money someplace else.
Jenna.
I have a question. So how do we know that it wasn't, I mean, who did we ask or how do we know it wasn't acting the way that we wanted to as far as economically downtown in that area? Then I have a follow-up.
Red card.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, fair question, very fair question. Having been through the dawn of this idea and the initiation of this program, certainly some of the harbingers of things that we were hoping to see would be increased activity throughout those periods of time that actually included folks walking around the downtown and sampling wares from participating agencies with bands and those kinds of things. And energy, if you will, that would be introduced into the area that participate, the areas that participated, that would include those kinds of things. For all intents and purposes, what we do, on the other hand, is pay officers to stand around downtown and watch that not happen. And so we're pulling officers out of overtime rotations where we need them to perform for minimal staffing throughout the summer, to come downtown and watch no activity take place. So we're paying our officers to be downtown to observe activity that is not happening. And to me, that is an incredibly frustrating application of an increasingly limited use of resources that we're experiencing in the police department in particular. And so that's my perspective. Evidently, the chief would like to weigh in, Mr. Mayor, if that would please the council.
Chief.
Mr. Mayor, the council, Kurt did an excellent job summing that up. We did not see participation. I think it's also fair to say that there was not an abundance of notifications coming into the clerk's office of, hey, we're going to participate this week. What we did find was that there was an event. And so it was conducive so that they seemed to be related to the event, but those other days of the week, those other non-event associated, there was no participation, but we were allocating the resources to it.
So
Good.
my follow-up was is this mainly related to the art walk, like the first Thursdays, I think is what they called it? Is that, you know, because I don't remember it being the whole Thursday through Saturday, but it was that. So I was curious if that was it. And then if we were able to get some feedback from the shop owners, like the DCBA, not the DDA, but the shop owners of there, because yeah, I totally agree with you. Save money where we can save money, but I don't want to just do that without asking if the shop actually saw more increase when people were walking around during those art walks, or at least maybe the Chamber of Commerce or Visit Casper have a say that helps downtown. You know, somebody who's more watching the downtown area and seeing what people are in commerce and, you know.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, another fair question. The art walk is certainly one of the events that takes place during the summer that still has a lot of relevance in the downtown and the OID. And as a matter of fact, you know, can be one of those events that is supported even on a weekly basis in the exact same scope that they currently enjoy, so that they can walk, you know, from art installation to art installation and with participating businesses and so on, in a way that they don't lose a single beat. So that would be my recommendation anyway. Same with David Street Station, like Councilor Kathy brought up. You know, there's a lot of those events that really are having a lot of support and a lot of energy and a lot of activity and participation that I would recommend shouldn't change in any way, because they do a lot of good things for the area. But to have our officers hang around for hours and hours watching an empty corridor for anticipated activity that just simply is not materializing, I would tell you is an absolute waste of resources, and I would highly encourage we consider a different way.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a couple points. One is a point of clarification, I think, for you, Carter, or Chief, if you feel free to weigh in. My understanding of the special event permit that folks pull to allow open containers is that there's some sort of proximity basis for, you know, the DDA, if they pull a special event permit for down David Street Station to do their fall festival. My understanding was that there was a, you know, geofence kind of around the venue that if you got a drink at David Street, you couldn't take that. So I guess is my understanding correct in the sense that if you pull a special event permit, there is a geographic area associated with that permit?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, you're 100% correct. Typically for events that take place, and we'll use the David Street Station as an example, they will pull a permit for perhaps a street closure between the Lyric, incidentally, and David Street Station, or other areas around the David Street Station, but it's not typically a permit for the entire downtown, to be, you know, relegated to an open container type use or area. On the other hand, when you consider the Art Walk, that actually is a pretty vacuous piece of event space that is used to conduct the Art Walk. And we would not suggest that change necessarily. And Fleur can go into a lot of detail as to how those permits work and the limitations or benefits that each provides better than I can. So if you'd like, I can invite Ms. Tremmel up to go through that in a little more detail, however you'd like to.
I would be curious to learn more about if the organizers of the Art Walk pulled a special event permit to allow open container during their event, if it allows people the ability to traverse pretty much our historic open container boundaries. I would be curious to know that. Yeah.
Is council okay with hearing from our city clerk? And Carla?
Have to post some.
No.
You want you for.
Your Honor, members of council. So we do have various permits. So our special event permits would allow that area, that whole corridor to be closed. We've used it for art walks. We've used it obviously for the Eclipse Festival, and we used it for Nick Fest certain areas. And so you can close larger areas, or you can use it for smaller areas if each venue wants to pull their own open container for a certain area. Okay, do you have anything to add?
Not really. That's not true. The event organizer would actually just be responsible for putting up the signs that say no alcohol beyond this point, and they would still have to wristband, because that's just part of the open container.
Thank you. So further clarification, let's keep using the Art Walk because that's one that everyone's familiar with, and I think it's a good illustration of what we're talking about here. For the next Art Walk, if they pull a special event permit to allow open container, they have the flexibility to determine the boundaries of that. And is there increased costs for each additional street that they want to have included in that? Go ahead.
It's not an extra cost for open containers.
Okay.
They are free no matter what.
So they would essentially put in an application for the boundaries that they want. I won't say that they determine it because we do work with the police department to make sure that those boundaries are, that works for everyone and for their flow of traffic and emergency and public safety. So.
Okay, thank you.
Carter.
Do you mind if I ask?
Absolutely,
Well, I
please,
think
yeah.
it's a pretty interesting stream of conversation here. So let's just say, for example, a traditional event that takes place, we keep using the Art Walk, and that's a fine example in my opinion. If they start coming forward every Thursday night and they say, we want the entirety of the downtown and the OID shut down every time an Art Walk takes place, do we have the obligation to every Thursday night shut down every street and no ID in downtown in order to accommodate the art walk, simply by virtue of the fact that they're asking for it.
We do not. Basically, I think what we do is our process, we get those applications, we forward it to the police department and they look at it to see how that works with everything else that's going on, as well as how that will, like I said, affect the flow of traffic and their public safety. So we even get it for parades. They'll look at the path of the parade and they'll determine if it's appropriate, if it's too much, and how it will work with our community. And so they do not have to approve it every time. They might say, well, this might work once. Or they might say, well, let's narrow this path and try and figure out what will make it work. So close.
Thank you, Councilor.
I mean, I think Art Walk is generally, I don't know, we keep coming back to Art Walk, but that's the most prevalent one, right?
Right.
Is generally the first one once a month. So I mean, I think that's a doable thing.
Right.
So I think that in that case, but I think taking it where someone's wanting to shut down streets every week, it's one of those things where I think the chief would be like, maybe we need to reconsider this and recalibrate, kind of figure that out. Well, my 2 cents is that if we have a mechanism for people to do these special events, an open container for the street, it makes no sense for us to be wasting, I shouldn't say wasting, but because essentially it is wasting financial resources and police time to do this in my opinion. So it's a no-brainer. So that's how I feel, unless there's any other comments. Yeah, Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally agree. I appreciate the city manager's candidness and agree that it does not make sense to keep police officers down there when there's no activity. I guess to put on the black hat though, if there is no activity, if we're not seeing any increases in crime and stuff, what is the risk of not staffing police officers to patrol the area, but keeping the policy in place if, regardless of how well it's being utilized, if it's having no impact on crime, or if not requiring our officers to be present, why not just staff them elsewhere and uphold the status quo?
Chief.
You don't trust them?
Mayor, Council, I wasn't sure if that was directed to me or Carter.
I think either will work. Yeah.
So what my officers are reporting is that when they are on duty on this, we very consistently staffed it during this last summer. When they were not seeing participants, they were not seeing the person, the wristbands showing that they were participating in this. I think the consensus that I'm trying to convey in my memorandum is that it's not fulfilling the design or the wishes or the aspirations that council had when we first instigated this, and there's no sign that that's going to change right away. And so there's the abundance of the lack of participation. I would not want to see this migrate out to now that there's no police officers here, so the ones that aren't wearing wristbands, we're like, yay, no enforcement, so we're gonna participate in our own way unofficially. I would not want to see that expanding without adherence to the boundaries and checking for minors and things of that nature. That really dovetails into the prior conversation. I don't want to see an expansion of public safety resources having to address these things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. It looks like city manager.
I can wait.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that perspective. We keep talking about some of the original intent of this, and I can't speak for anyone else on council, but part of my original intent was I had heard from people and I had personal experiences that when there are things going on downtown, there are circumstances, there are situations where people feel pressured to have to finish their drink so that they can move on with their group to the next place. And there are establishments downtown that might not have any reason to pull a special permit because they're not doing anything in particular, but there might be an event down the street that a group of folks is wanting to get to. And so part of my original intent was it would allow folks free travel. There wouldn't be a pressure to have to finish or binge your drink before moving on to the next location. That was part of the original appeal to me. And so I don't know how you measure that or solicit feedback on whether that helped or not in regards to that issue. But for that reason, I would want to move forward with, in our memo, it says the police department recommends at the time appropriate next year when we are considering this, that we solicit input from establishments. I would lean more towards that than making a decision tonight to just axe the program and not do it next year. I would like to get more feedback from business owners on, you know, that issue that I brought up with this, pressure to binge before you move on to the next location, or the economic that we brought up, anecdotally, we saw a few people participating, but before we did make an ultimate decision one way or another, I would still want to get more feedback from the establishments on what they've seen, the economic impact, the societal impact. I just like being as fully informed as possible before making decisions and stuff.
Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilor. Thank you for your example. I think the only time a group can move forward from, we'll just say a bar or a brewery or whatever, to another activity that is down the street, and they want to take their drinks with them instead of just like, bam, slamming them back and getting on the road, would be if indeed those particular businesses are participating. That brewery or that bar or that club or whatever has to be a participating entity. And the problem is we're not seeing them show up. We get maybe one or two each year. And so the chances are great, statistically speaking, that the people you're talking about are probably not in one of those establishments because they're not showing up to get those bands. And so to me, that is the feedback. To me, that is the data that says this isn't making any sense. And from a data-driven standpoint, from a managerial position, the data very clearly tells me this is a waste of money. And so if you like data and you like data-driven managerial decisions, that data's there. And I think I'm probably overstating my point or restating too many times.
So I guess the council, the vice mayor left. Try to get her back. So it sounds like got at least one council member or counselor that wants to pump the brakes a bit and maybe get some more feedback from business owners. I guess I'm gonna have to kind of pause here for a minute because I want the vice mayor to be here for this vote too. Yeah, Jay, you wanna give me, stretch it out for me? Just make it up.
I mean, I guess just procedurally or process wise, I mean, what if we make this decision now versus create some time period where we get input, what implications does that have on budgeting, making the decisions for next summer, all of that? Like, is there a period in here where we could open up for public comment or, invite people to reach out to us or whatever for a period of 3 or 4 weeks or something? I mean, I just am not sure what our time frame is.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councilor, for the question. Indeed, it is helpful to get these decisions sooner than later because without a doubt, believe it or not, come January, we're going to start the rat race of putting budgets together and coming forward to you guys in various stages and steps, all the way leading up to April and May to present you a completed budget, draft proposal, etc. This indeed is admittedly a little ahead of the ball, if you will, which is typically where I like to be, But without a doubt, if council wants to take more time, I am not going to lose the budget altogether over this decision not happening tonight. Is it still important for me to give you my view? I think it is. And I think it is important to do it on a proactive basis as well, so that we don't have to waste a lot of energy in contemplating these kinds of questions moving forward. However, I do admit freely that because we have brought this up in the typical time frame that we do from a debriefing standpoint, sure, it would be advantageous to go ahead and disband with it right now. but you do have time. Absolutely.
Thanks, Carter. Steve?
Here's my comment. First of all, thank you for being proactive. That's what I like about and what I think of as a city manager. Bring us issues so that we can look at them ahead of time, so we aren't having to have special meetings or whatever, trying to force deadlines. So thank you for that. The other thing about it is, we have the data that says one or two people may be established, may be participating. If we were to hold a public meeting, you will get those one or two establishments and those customers of those establishments that will be in here. The rest of the establishments and the rest of the people will not show up. So it's just like anything else, is the special interests and the ones that are using them will come here and say, oh yes, let's keep it. But the rest of the people don't really care. And so we are catering to the minority. And as far as I'm concerned, we have the data. It's time to make a decision. And I would just as soon go ahead and do away with the program. If we want to do anything, I would say we need to make sure that everybody understands the procedures for Art Walk, for David Street Station, so that those are perfectly clear and we continue to do what we've been doing for those events. But we don't need to keep underutilizing our police staff to watch vacant streets.
Michael?
I just wanted to, thank you, Mayor, for responding. I just wanted to clarify I want to make sure I understand the wristband thing. Are those required? This is news to me. I was thinking they were just indicating that the person had been checked, that they were a drinking age, but it's actually stipulating that they are of drinking age and they could move from venue to venue. Is that? I got confused there in the conversation.
Mayor, can I
Please.
respond to this? You know, what we were trying to accomplish, Counselor, is that the police officers needed to know the legitimacy of somebody walking around in our downtown area.
Yeah.
Consuming alcohol. We wanted to prevent, say, the local street inebriate from walking around with a 40-ounce, that's not participating in, that hasn't been, as part of our tips training program, checked and verified that they're an adult, that they're not a danger to themselves, and so forth and so on. That wristband signified to the police officers, we do not need to get involved in their evening. We don't need to go interrupt them. We don't need to go talk to them unless they are posing an obvious problem. So it was a convenience to the patrons and participants. It also helped us understand where they originated, what establishment they came from. So that if an establishment was not checking IDs and issuing out wristbands to minors, we wanted to be able to follow up on that and help prevent those things. So it was a simple control that we put in to make sure that we were safeguarding the interests of the business, we were safeguarding the interests of our public safety goals for our community and the downtown area.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, Chief. I just wanted to follow up to Councilor Gamrod. I always finish my drink before I go to the next place because I don't want to spill it. So just a side note.
Sure. You shouldn't be that intoxicated.
Well, that's right. That's right. Thank you.
Kyle. Thanks, Mace. I guess I'm not feeling the pressure to make a decision tonight. To Councilor Kathy's point about just 3 people participating, the memo states that actually 7 establishments sought authorization to participate. We only got favorable feedback from 3. The other 4, it sounds like we sent an email or made a call and they never got back to us. So, 7 establishments to me is a fairly significant number considering the area that we're talking about. Going back to my comments earlier about the severity of the correlation between alcohol use and crime in our area, I don't feel super strongly about maintaining this. So I would, be open to potentially getting rid of the program, but again, not feeling the pressure to make the decision tonight. I would want more feedback from folks. So I guess that's the only comments I would make. I totally agree with the city manager. It doesn't make sense to staff it the way we staffed it. But I guess I haven't been convinced thoroughly enough that we need to be staffing it at the level we're staffing it. So I would just personally like more information, but again, I don't feel super strongly one way or another. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so let's see, I guess I'll just, since Kyle put the thought on the floor to say, hey, let's wait, and then maybe ask those establishments that have participated. I guess give it a thumbs up if you are okay with that to me. To wait? To wait, yeah, to give more time and then do some research. Thumbs up for that. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then looks like you're in favor of going and axing the program now and going forward with it. Is that a support of that? Okay. Looks like you got the go ahead card.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
And I guess for me, while I certainly understand where Kyle and Jai are coming from, for me, generally when Carter usually comes with a recommendation, the recommendation is usually taken very seriously. And while I don't want to stifle thought process and people coming to express how they are, unfortunately, I think what's happening with it is that people are, even though they're signing up, I don't think people are actually utilizing that and taking the time and the effort to do it. And I think it's been a drain on the resources. If by chance we get a big draw of people coming in here from establishments saying this is wrong, I can't believe you did this, then we can have that conversation to say, okay, then you need to be a part of this. But based upon what our city manager and police department are seeing, I think that we're seeing that this isn't happening. It's wasting a lot of money and time for our police. So thank you. Thank you, Steve.
So there was it.
So Amber, we made the decision like within the first 5 minutes when we just kind of sat around and talked for a while and thought that let's see how long we can keep Amber out
I
there.
could have gone home. You wanted me to. No problem.
We're missing a couple, like, oh wow, 3 counselors. You want us to give it a 5-second break? Sure. Okay, let's do a 5-minute.
Tell her if it does affect her. Or does she just read it on oral city?
Should probably tune in the live stream.
What was it?
Let's take a 5-minute break, you guys, and then we'll come back. 5 minutes. Is our COO.
Why?
Okay, let's go ahead and move on so we can get everybody home tonight. Municipal golf course rates, Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Pursuant to the business plan that council adopted or gave us approval for, you were aware that we would come to you periodically to talk about rates for the golf course. Council is also aware that the golf course happens to be our recreational enterprise that supports itself from an operational standpoint. I wouldn't say that as it relates to all of the capital that the golf course needs. And in fact, the current business plan really, it supports some of the smaller level rolling stock replacements and those kinds of things, more so than a lot of the larger scale capital needs that the facility has. Despite the fact that it currently does support itself from an operational standpoint, that doesn't mean that we don't need to consider rates from time to time, because indeed we do have the situation where expenses increase over time and things occur, particularly in inflationary environments, where if we're not keeping pace, we certainly can fall behind and our thresholds that we've established with you starts to lose. And we certainly don't want to do that. So Zulema and her team are here tonight to talk about this recommendation and get your feedback and direction if you're so willing, pursuant to the presentation she has for you tonight.
Zulema.
Mayor and councilors. As the city manager mentioned, I do have a fantastic team that I want you to meet tonight. You know Randy Norvell, he is our parks manager, and of course the golf course operation falls under the parks division. But I don't think you've had an opportunity to meet our new golf professional, Ben Spires. He has been with us for the last couple of months, came to us from Colorado Springs, and we're really excited to have him on our team. And then, of course, Tom Brower also, our COO, is here. So we're all here to answer any questions that you may have. But really, to keep it quite simple, we are coming to you tonight with a request for approval to increase our rates effective January 1. So we'll primarily impact next golf season. As you likely read in the memo, we did make a rate increase in the golf enterprise in 2021 in advance of the 21-22 season. But there were only two items that were increased at that time, $25 for season passes and $25 for half season passes, which are offered from July 1 on through the end of the season. Other than those two items, we have not increased the other rates since 2016. So it's been a pretty significant amount of time. And we feel like that increase is justifiable and necessary in order for us to implement some pretty exciting upgrades and changes of the golf operation, including our new golf cart fleet, which has been purchased but has not arrived. This year's fleet was a leased fleet that we got from the company that we purchased from, but they were by no means a new fleet, and we had a fair amount of problems with that fleet. So we're very excited to get the new fleet. The new fleet is intended to be GPS equipped, which will help us limit where people can operate that fleet. So from a maintenance standpoint, that's fantastic. But it's also an exciting revenue generator potentially because we can utilize the software within that fleet to purchase or sell advertising. And so we're excited about that. In addition, we're working on some rebranding, and that rebranding will be applied to all the merchandise in the pro shop, which Ben is in the process of evaluating right now to kind of maximize the return on the merchandise that we sell there. You know, just a myriad of opportunity and great things in the golf course. The rainfall dispenser, though we were not able to implement fully this season, should be fully operational next season for users. And of course, that will expand the use of the driving range into the early morning hours and into the evening hours after the pro shop potentially is closed. So we just feel like those added benefits and values for our users, again, justify these rate increases. And of course, in the comparison, we tried to demonstrate that we still remain very, very competitive, especially in the Casper area, but certainly in the region when it comes to other golf courses. So with that, I would welcome any questions for me or any member of my team.
Steve.
I noticed in the past in your 21 rate, you had a distinguishing dollar amount for weekday and weekend 9 and 18 hole greens fees, where in your proposed 24 rate, they're the same for both. Was there a reason that you decided to stick with the same rate for both as opposed to an increase on the weekend versus the weekdays?
Mayor, Counselor, the simple answer is to simplify the rate structure, both for customers and for our staff who's entering the amount that people need to pay. It is, as I understand it, and I will let these gentlemen speak to it if I'm speaking incorrectly, but as I understand it, it's pretty common for courses now to move towards a single rate regardless of the day of the week. And so we're just going to follow through.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question, Zulima. Thanks for the information. I just want to make sure people are aware because I think it's very helpful when you include these in a variety of discussions we have, but the rate comparison to all the other, you know, we got golf courses in Sheridan, Gillette, Rollins, Buffalo. As somebody who does not hit the links around the state ever, this is super helpful because I don't have any idea what people are charging. So this is like really helpful information. So I would just recommend to people that have thoughts on this one way or another. It's the last page of our work packet, page 12, for that comparison graph. Appreciate you including it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Zulima and her team? Yeah, go ahead, Zulima.
Mayor, I just did want to speak to one point that the city manager made, and one sort of exciting component of this proposal. As Carter alluded to, we historically have not been able to cover the capital expenses of the golf course fully. But I can tell you that this proposal was structured so that we are able, with the estimated revenue that we hope to get, assuming a decent weather season, we are able to cover all of our 25 capital requests as published in this year's capital budget, with the exception of dredging the pond, which of course we're doing some homework on to determine what the actual cost of that will be. So all the mowers and the small capital that we are going to be asking for in next fiscal year's budget should be covered through the rate increase.
Anything else? So Carter, do you need a thumbs up from us to give you to go ahead to make this increase? See
Mr.
direction
Mayor, if
requested.
council would be okay with that, that would be great. Otherwise, we could certainly do more homework if it is necessary.
So is council okay with this direction to move forward with it? Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Zulima. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All right. Agenda review. Carter, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I am looking at the grid document that undoubtedly you all have in front of you there. Just a couple things to point out, particularly for the next meeting that we have together, which is November 7th. You will be entertaining the dispersal of 3 bar and grill licenses, which you have discussed to some degree in your previous work session. You will also be considering on third reading the camping ordinance as well as the parking and dwelling restriction ordinance, almost companion ordinances, if you will. So I wanted to, bring that to your attention. One of the other items too that I wanted to bring to your attention is with regard to the work session of the 14th. We do anticipate having a conversation with you about leadership selection and the corresponding discussion that council asked for as it relates to leadership removal. What it is that you would like to see incorporated into your policies of the same. We hope to be able to bring, and I say hope to because we are working feverishly on the Casper Business Center design concept. We have a meeting coming up with the committee. I understand here soon as well that hopefully we can, work out any of those last minute questions that the committee would recommend. I like to have these conversations kind of conclude with the back page that you can kind of foresee what some of our issues on the near horizon are that we wanted to chat with you about. In the event that some of these don't make sense or you aren't seeing items that you want to see on our horizon, they aren't included. With that, Mr. Mayor, I defer to the council.
So does council have anything on either of those work sessions or regular meetings that are coming up or? Yeah, Michael.
Just, are we scheduled to have a conversation about that idea of a tiered, incentivized liquor licensing approach? I know you mentioned that in your introduction to when we began the conversation about the DUI report. I don't know if that got on the grid or not.
Good, Carter.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, thank you for asking that question. I have not been given that direction as of yet. And so at this point, I would say not yet.
You're welcome to make that if you'd like to, but you don't have to do it right now. If you don't like to. If you don't
I would recommend that, but I defer to the other council members if there's not the right time. I don't know that it's you know, it has to be imminent, but if it's,
Well, I mean,
I just don't want to forget it.
What you could do is you could make ask the council to see if we could put that on a future work session to see if
Sure.
council's okay with that.
Okay.
Is
Yeah, I would like
council okay with
to put
putting that on a future work session? Just thumbs up or thumbs down, so.
Like Seth's thing, right?
Oh,
Yes.
responsible.
Yeah, responsible.
So, could I,
Responsible vendor.
You had more to do with that, so.
if you don't mind my amending it,
Yeah,
I was
please.
intending on bringing it up during around the table anyway.
Okay, yeah, it was good. I was too.
So in light of the conversation that we had earlier with the chief, I would like to have a future conversation about, a variety of topics related to, I was surprised that Wyoming doesn't have anything on the books in regards to not serving someone that's obviously, under the influence, and shouldn't be served. And so I think it's worth a follow-up conversation to discuss a potential incentive program and or a future WAM resolution to advocate that the state of Wyoming not only make it illegal to serve someone who's obviously in a state that they shouldn't be imbibing more alcohol, but also to Councillor Sutherland's point about prevention being a key component. I do think the state needs to step up more in regards to its prevention efforts. And so in the spirit of advocating for a two-pronged approach, I think it's worth a follow-up conversation, whether we advocate to WAM or just do things local ordinance level to discuss those two topics further, prevention and then incentive and or enforcement programs to keep people in line with this, that notion of not serving people that shouldn't be served.
I would support that.
Clear as mud.
I would support that.
I'm known for offering my very clear direction.
No, I think that I felt that was clear. I mean, I think that's Carter, did you have kind of an understanding of that?
I've been taking notes feverishly.
Pending if council wants to put this on a future work session, so we should clear that up. If council fully understood kind of what that direction looked like, is that something that council would want to talk about in the future? I think legislative conversations around what the chief had talked about, incentive program that I think that we had talked about with Seth. And I don't know how we would want to break that up, Carter, if that's something, if council agrees with that, if that's something that's a pretty big chunk to talk about in a work session. But I guess see if council's open to having that conversation at a work session.
That'd be okay, but we don't need to just rush into it. You do realize that it's just been in the last 30 years that we've actually banned people from drinking and driving. So we don't want to get too far into this.
Take it slowly. Okay, so it looks like there's support for that to go in a work session, Carter, and if we need to clear that up more, but it sounds like we've got a pretty good understanding of what that looks like, I think. Okay, anything else on the agenda? Anything that anybody wants to see coming up? Okay. All right, legislative review. Anything, Carter?
No, sir.
Okay. Council around the table. We'll go ahead and start with. Yeah, Michael, sorry.
Not much to report. I just I attended the public officer training today with the State Department of Audit. It's interesting, less painful than I expected. We were done early, so all's good.
Great, thank you. Steve.
Well, I was discussing with Carter, it looks like we just can't keep anything new in the city. The railings on the McKinley Street underpass on the south side of the railroad tracks and on the east side of the road have already been run over and dented up and dinged up. So, yeah. And the other things, I've got a CPU meeting in the morning at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
No nice things, huh?
Brandy.
So Port Wyoming Center has Mike Rowe on Thursday. I know there's still seats available for that at 6 p.m. And Sunday is the Science Zone trick or treat from, I believe, 2 to 7. And I don't have any meetings or anything, so that's really all I had was fun stuff. Good day.
Of course.
Also, I survived the training, so that's good.
Well, I didn't make the cut. I was on the waiting list, so, but I plan to be at the next one. So help me.
Well, it sounds like
Let's
it's
see.
getting shorter the
No-
longer
no
you go
training
down.
Apparently, yeah.
No training removed from leadership.
Yeah, I have till July, apparently. Amber.
I did have meetings, but really the main update I would have had for you was the LGBTQ advisory committee meeting, and I think they provided an update that was more than what I would have provided to you. So I think you're up to date on that committee at this moment.
Thank you, Amber. Jai.
Thanks. I don't have any committees yet, so I don't have any reports out, but we had a conversation. I think
Yep.
we'll figure that out in the coming days.
I was gonna talk about it. It might,
Okay.
I'll talk about it too. No, it's perfect.
Great. Okay. I guess maybe just an idea, but take it or leave it. I mean, just given that the conversation around alcohol related crime, I mean, it seems like much bigger, and if we really do want to take kind of a two-pronged or multi-pronged approach, I almost wonder if it requires some like concerted effort by a few people. I don't know if it would be a task force item or something like that, but maybe there'd be a way to kind of break it down and get some people like really focused on it rather than having it in like piecemeal conversations over. I don't know the best approach. It's just an idea. But that was it.
Thanks, Jai. Appreciate it. Jenna.
All right, so well, Dancing of the Stars was a huge success over the weekend. So congratulations to the winners and all the participants that did, and they brought in some great money, donations for the Mercer House there. Just a shout out for Ford Wyoming Center. I know they've been trying to put some social media out there as far as carpooling for the upcoming Pentatonics show that's happening. It's sold out, so they're encouraging. They know parking's going to be an issue, so they're encouraging and working for carpooling and working on maybe having some kind of transfers going on from a different parking lot down by, I think, don't quote me on this, but maybe the Mike Lansing Park, I think, was an idea, and then busing them up there. But just so people are aware and they are prepared, but carpooling would be an awesome idea to get a parking spot up at the Fort Wyoming site because of all the sports ranch construction. A lot of their lots are gone. Also, they still have the Broadway Play Series. There's 3 of them, and it's relatively cheap for all 3 of them. I mean, it's not like $100 and some bucks, but you get all those shows, and they have low participation in there. So if people don't start buying tickets and prepare for the Broadway show, they're not going to bring it back. So I would encourage people to do it because it's great and it brings the arts, and these are great shows that come from New York and all over the place. So they're not. And they're come for one day, which is unusual because usually when they have a Broadway play, they come and they hold it for 2 or more days. So they come in and out. So it's quite an expense. So support the Ford Wyoming Center. Go see, I think they have Shrek, Annie and Hairspray. Yeah. So support them. Good girls' night, boys' night, whatever you want to do. Get a date night even set. Also, it's still Christmas parade season for the Chamber of Commerce is taking applications for anybody. We're in the $50 tier now. And so we already have about 70, close, never mind. Let me think. I think we're close to like 45 floats, if not more right now, but we're still in the middle of taking it. So the cutoff for that is around November 17th, I want to say. And then there's absolutely no registrations after that because we got to prepare with the city and the roads and get all that done. So the theme is Christmas in Toyland. Prepare yourselves. It's going to be epic.
Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilor Sutherland's point about dedicating some extra time to the topic of alcohol, I think that's worth the effort. I do think there's a couple entities in town that are already kind of set up to do that. And so I'll be happy to reach out to my contacts if they're still current. But I know the chief and some of his officers are liaisons to some of these groups I can think of. Natrona County Prevention Coalition would be a great one. And then, I believe they're still doing the meth and substance abuse conference. And so, might be a really good topic for them to even recruit a speaker and bring a professional speaker in to speak exclusively to this topic. So I'm happy to reach out to those folks and see if they want to take it into consideration and leverage our focus within their groups on it. We had a Metro Animal Shelter Task Force meeting last Wednesday. I'll provide a little bit of an update from the past 2 meetings since I put Councilor Pollack on the spot last time and she hadn't had the opportunity to attend. So doing a few things up at the shelter. They got their hands on some of the turf from Keller Walsh High School, so they're using that to create a outdoor play area in addition to a walking path, a reintegration area for folks to be able to socialize with animals that they're considering adopting and stuff like that. So we're doing that up there. We council accepted a bid for a generator back on September 19th, our meeting that night, so that we can avoid any issues this upcoming winter with losing power and heat up there. We have discussed the pros and cons of joint powers board or other methods of providing guidance and direction to the shelter, as well as what it would look like to have a nonprofit like the Humane Society take over shelter services. So that's a conversation we're having and kind of working through. Captain Dabney and Lieutenant Jones have been putting together a document to outline their desire to have a comprehensive shelter needs assessment done to determine whether the shelter can fit our future needs or whether we would need to rebuild. So as this council is deliberating here in the very near future about what to do with the shelter, about whether we renovate the current structure or we rebuild new, that structure is 40, 50 years old. And the chief had provided us an update that just pet ownership, it continues to rise. And just a discussion about whether the shelter as it sits can serve our needs now and into the future. That's a conversation that we're having. And so we'll probably get a memo and a request from those officers regarding a comprehensive shelter needs assessment. So stay tuned for that here in the coming weeks. And then also just entertaining note, working with a group out of Colorado to trap raccoons. We have a pretty bad raccoon problem here. And so it was a lighthearted moment that they're covering all the costs. It's no cost to us as a city, but I believe their intent is to come up here, round up a bunch of raccoons, take them back to a re-education camp where they are reacclimated to living in the wild, because I guess they get pretty spoiled and vulnerable, just getting hand fed by people all the time. So they acclimate them back to the wild and then release them in areas where they won't cause any disruption to humans. So there's groups that do that. So very interesting. We had a Casper Housing Authority board meeting last Thursday. Liberty Square, which is the new development over on Beverly Street. They have 32 units leased up, 28 are open and getting their final finishes. So they'll be able to lease those up shortly as well. Reminder that the emergency housing voucher COVID relief program ended. So, some of the homeless issues that we're having are probably a result of that, and it'll probably continue to spike as people get used to living without that sort of relief. They recently sold Province Court over by the post office in the middle of town. It was their last public housing unit. And so that brought 24 units back into the private rental market, and improvements can finally be made there. A lot of folks, I wasn't aware, other folks may not be aware that public housing, that specific designation, HUD would not allow improvements such as dishwasher, washing machine, and others. They consider those luxury items. And so Province Court was a property that the Casper Housing Authority could not make those sorts of improvements to because the funding that they get for that facility wouldn't cover it. So now that they're back in private hands, hopefully they'll be able to be improved and add some amenities that folks are used to that add to quality of life these days. The Willard School project is still moving forward slowly. They're hoping to have that bid out by the end of the year. And then they'll be doing some strategic planning soon. The board will. And then they also have some upcoming fundraisers, Birds and Bucks, and then also the Stuff the Van Toy Drive. They're a recipient from some of those efforts. So just keep an eye on those and contribute how you can. That's all I got. Thanks.
Vice Mayor.
I just attended Visit Casper today, and so they've got a lot of different things planning, but they are planning on Winterfest, January 27th through February 4th. So they're putting different things together. It sounds like if it comes together, it's gonna be a good time. That's it.
Thank you. Just a couple things. The vice mayor and I, Carter, Fleur, and oh my gosh. Space escapes me all of a sudden. Sorry. Met with a fellow from the JFK school. Who was it? Oh, Craig. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Yes, Craig. From the with Liz, and we've met with talking about housing reform. And housing reform, don't make me laugh, Carter. Just completely got a break for it. Had a really good conversation around housing reform and what that looks like. I think Carter will be coming and having more of a deeper conversation with us about what that looks like, not only on a statewide level, what that looks like also on a local level, what we're able to do for housing reform as we look at obviously the need for housing. We know that we've been talking a lot about those that are homeless and those that are houseless, and how do we deal with that issue. And so it was a good conversation that I think helped us to understand the level of how far you can go with deregulation, where it can almost go too far to a point of, where's that middle ground of making regulation and making it capable for people, especially governmental aid, entities like ourselves, to work on trying to open up ways for housing to be created on a decent level. And so I think that's a conversation that Carter will come to us down the road and have a good conversation with as we move forward with that. I don't know if you had any comments about that.
No, we definitely need some housing reform in the state. And so I think that would be a much better conversation than the transfer tax.
Yeah, it was a really good conversation, and something that I'm very hopeful with that we certainly need as we see a crunch in housing. The only other thing, a couple other things that I have, the Horse Palace opening in Mesa has their grand opening tomorrow. So I'm going to swing on by there and see that ribbon cutting as they open up. And then on Friday, I'll be speaking to 8 junior youth of the year. They'll be in town from the state for the state junior youth of the year. They'll be giving speeches and I'll be speaking to them, trying to encourage them to change the world around them. So that's all I got. I think we're done. Thanks. Can't believe I forgot Craig's name. Don't tell Craig it. I forgot his name. You already texted me. Craig, the mayor forgot your name.
Thanks, I can see him. I
Oh, you can see his face.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah.